You might have heard people use the phrase "run the gauntlet." These days, people typically use it in reference to someone being heavily criticized, or when someone's up against difficult obstacles or public trials. You might have even played Gauntlet ball in gym class, a game where one student will run from one side of the gym to the other while the other kids try to hit him with dodgeballs. But did you know that this phrase actually comes from a horrific form of punishment? Today we're talking all about running the gauntlet, one of the worst punishments in the history of mankind. In its most basic form, running the gauntlet involves someone who is declared guilty being forced to run between two rows of soldiers. The soldiers would attack them with sticks or other weapons as they ran by. Why is it called the gauntlet? That's more of a corruption of the Swedish word Gauntlet, and it was originally spelled Gantelop or Gantlop. Over time, English speakers twisted this and began using the word gauntlet instead. While fierce in battle, they were also known for extracting violence against civilians. It was even said by one chronicler that the devil refused to let the Landsknechts into hell because he was so afraid of them. If the warlord ran out of money to pay them, the Landsknechts would desert him before terrorizing a city or countryside in order to get the money they were owed. In 1527, they even invaded Rome to get their pay. They also weren't above switching sides if the opposing side paid better. Morality was not their strong suit. They were also known for their colorful and, according to the pious nuns, devilish outfits. They were exempt from the laws that dictated how each social class dressed, so they could wear whatever they wanted. I don't know if anyone would want to try telling them what to wear. Given the Landsknechts' violent nature, that might have been a death sentence. Landsknechts dressed colorfully and would either wear very tight or voluminous trousers. Their shirts would have puffy sleeves, colorful stockings, and they would don large hats that they would decorate with feathers. But what often upset the religious, however, were their codpieces. Landsknechts preferred to wear large ones to make people believe they had large genitals. I guess it was the Landsknechts' version of those jerky guys overcompensating with flashy sports cars. You could also say the Landsknechts were influencers of their time. Instead of leading the masses through TikTok dances or Instagram photo shoots, civilians would mimic their fashion style throughout Europe. I guess the more things change, the more they stay the same. But what did they have to do with running the gauntlet? Whenever one of the Landsknechts committed a serious crime, they were sentenced to run the gauntlet. But they wouldn't be sentenced to it for rape, murder, or pillaging. They were sentenced to corporal punishment for disobeying direct orders or if they dishonored the flag of their regiment. Whenever a member of the Landsknechts was found guilty, the men from the squadron would create two rows with a lane down the middle. The convicted man would have to run through the lane, suffering blows from each of his comrades until he died. To the Landsknechts, this was considered an honorable death. And if any of the Landsknechts created a gap for the convicted to escape, they would have to run the gauntlet next. During the 18th and 19th century, Prussia was a military superpower. They were known for their disciplined soldiers. This was partly due to the fact that Prussia would punish wayward soldiers with their version of running the gauntlet. If a Prussian soldier was sentenced to run the gauntlet, they would strip him down to the waist and place a lead ball between his teeth. The soldier would have to slowly walk the gauntlet 6 times over the course of 3 days. He would have to face a row of 300 soldiers, and every single one of them would hit him on the back with a stick. In front of the soldier would be an officer pointing his saber at the Prussian soldier's chest. This would keep him from walking too fast. If the soldier fell and couldn't continue to walk, they would lay him on a bed of straw, and then his fellow soldiers would continue to finish off the remaining wax while he lay there helpless. We can't say that we blame the soldiers for following orders if that's what they had to go up against. The British Royal Navy had its own version of the gauntlet when punishing seamen for minor offenses, like failing to return on time from leave or not cleaning up their spaces. Whenever a sailor had to run the gauntlet, he would have to run around the ship's deck. As he ran around the ship, his shipmates would hit him with weapons that were variations of the cat-o'-nine-tails. They might also punch or kick the condemned. Since it was often up to the men to decide the punishment, how well a sailor fared could come down to how popular he was with the crew. Sometimes the boatswain would strike the sailor with his own cat-o'-nine-tails before the gauntlet began. That way, any following lashings the sailor received would aggravate the existing lacerations. In 1760, one of the seamen on the guard ship HMS Royal George, Francis Lanyon, was forced to run the gauntlet 3 times. His crime? He had failed to return from leave. Lanyon's crewmates didn't seem to agree with the punishment since Lanyon would receive no substantive injuries. He had even come out of it smiling. Maybe he enjoyed a little casual BDSM. The British would ban the practice by 1806. There are also examples of running the gauntlet in Dutch colonial settlements in New Amsterdam. On December 28, 1671, Melchior Claus, a soldier, was court-martialed for theft. He was sentenced to the Gantelop, which was their name for running the gauntlet. Official documents describe the process that Claus was subjected to. Convicted soldiers would have to run the gauntlet that was the length of the fort after being stripped down to the waist. He would be hit with rods throughout the entire ordeal. After Claus was beaten, he was kicked out of the garrison and barred from returning. Sounds like it might have been a pretty nasty ordeal, but Claus was able to escape with his life. But the gauntlet wasn't just for soldiers. Until the 18th century in Sweden, civilians could be punished with running the gauntlet for certain crimes. In parts of Germany, Austria, and Russia, they would use the Spießrutenlaufen, or pike run. Until the 19th century, they would strip a condemned soldier down to the waist before forcing him to pass through 2 rows of soldiers, which was also known as die Gasse or the alley, who would hit him with switches or cudgel him. There would be a subaltern in front of him with a blade to keep the condemned from running. Sometimes they would even drag the soldier in question through the die Gasse with a rope around his hands or being chased by a pursuer. There are a lot of different traditions surrounding the gauntlet. In some, people must run the gauntlet until they die. In others, if the condemned survived the gauntlet, they have earned a clean slate. As brutal as the ordeal was, the goal wasn't always to kill the person forced to run the gauntlet. According to John Stark's memoir, an American military officer who was considered a hero of the Revolutionary War claimed to have been captured by the Abenaki tribe and forced to run the gauntlet. He had been captured while hunting with his brother and 2 other men, Amos Eastman and David Stinson. Stark had been collecting traps to return home when he was found by an Abenaki war party. The Abenaki warriors found the rest of Stark's hunting party, shooting Stinson and capturing Eastman. Stark's brother was able to escape when Stark shouted out a warning. Stark would be beaten as punishment for allowing his brother to escape. Everything we know about what happened next comes from John Stark's memoir. The Abenaki warriors created 2 rows, everyone armed with a club or a rod. Stark was aware of what they had planned to do. They were going to make him run the gauntlet. Eastman would go first, singing a song about how he would beat all your young men, insulting the warriors. They would in turn beat Eastman so severely that he fell to the ground in exhaustion as soon as he passed through the line. Stark wrote in his memoir, Stark followed, singing the words, "I'll kiss all your women," his pole being ornamented with a loon skin. After receiving a blow or 2, he turned his pole right and left, dealing a blow at each turn, and made his way without much injury, his enemies making way for him to avoid the sweeping blows dealt by his pole. This feat pleased the old Indians who enjoyed the sport at their young men's expense. After this, Stark was treated well while being held captive. The following spring, Stark would be ransomed for 103 Spanish dollars by an agent from the province of Massachusetts Bay. Eastman, on the other hand, was released for $60. The men were able to return home to New Hampshire. All of this is based off of Stark's memoir, so it's anyone's guess what the real truth might have been. There have been a lot of extremely uncharitable accounts of Native Americans from the armies that wiped them out. In September 1778, Simon Kenton, an American frontiersman and soldier, was captured by the Shawnee tribe while on a spying mission in Chillicothe, Ohio. Once they had taken him prisoner, he was forced to run a quarter-mile gauntlet. Kenton would have to run between 2 lines of Shawnee warriors who would beat him with sticks. It was a ritual that had killed prisoners before, but Kenton said to have survived the ordeal 9 times. After running the gauntlet and being subjected to other methods of torture, Kenton was severely wounded. The Shawnee took Kenton 50 miles to the upper Sandusky to continue torturing him, but he was saved by an interpreter for the British Indian Department, Pierre Juillard. Due to the Shawnee's respect for Kenton's endurance, he was given the name Kutahota, which meant the condemned man. Kenton would be adopted into the tribe by a mother whose son had been killed. One of Kenton's friends, Simon Girty, was also known for having run the gauntlet. Girty was often scorned by the other white frontiersmen for being a, quote, Indian lover. Girty was only 15 years old when he was taken into captivity by the Seneca tribe. The Delaware had been impressed that Girty had kept up with them while traveling without complaint. Girty had also realized he would fare better if he learned the Seneca language, so he did. They were pleased with how quickly he picked up the words they would teach him. Girty also knew that it wasn't unusual to be adopted into a tribe, but he would first have to face the gauntlet. Girty was stripped naked before he had to face 2 rows of men, women, and children. They would hit him with whips and clubs. He would only be considered worthy of adoption if he could reach the pole at the end of the gauntlet. If Girty were to fall and couldn't get back up, they would leave him for dead. Girty knew he could handle it, although he feared a fatal blow to the head. He believed it was the only thing that would kill him. He would tuck his chin into his chest, keeping his eyes downward, crossing his arms over his head and bent over. This allowed Girty to protect his head, groin, and chest. Girty's strategy worked as he survived the gauntlet. Afterward, he was dragged to the river where it said that some of the women would wash the whiteness out of him. Girty then had to sit and not cry or make a sound as an elderly man plucked out his hair. By the end of the ritual, he was bald. They only left a scalp lock on his crown. After, he was given Seneca clothing, and he was considered a member of the tribe. You may know the name Daniel Boone, but did you also know he ran the Gauntlet? On February 8, 1778, Daniel Boone was captured by a British-backed Shawnee war party. At the time, he'd been hunting. After being captured, he discovered that a group of 100 Shawnee were planning an attack on Fort Boonesboro, one of the 3 settlements that existed in what's now known as Kentucky. The Shawnee were accompanied by 2 aides to the British governor of Detroit. Boone told the Shawnee that his men would surrender peacefully and would willingly go back with him to Detroit. Boone was able to convince the men to give themselves up, believing it was the only way to save their families. While the Shawnee didn't kill them, they did force the men to run the gauntlet. They would have to face the same torture as Gertie and Kenton, and the men were kept prisoners for months. According to historical accounts, they stayed friendly with the Shawnee while waiting for a chance to escape. It's said that Boone was adopted into the Chillicothe division of the Shawnee due to their respect for his hunting skills. They named him Sheltowee, or Big Turtle. While many claim that Boone was adopted by Chief Blackfish, historian John Sudgeon suggested that this might not be true. He suggests it might be another family entirely. After several months, the men's family assumed they had died. Daniel Boone's wife, Rebecca Boone, moved back to North Carolina with their children. When June came, the Shawnee planned to take revenge on Boonesboro due to a failed attempt to capture Donnelly's fort. Boone was able to escape in time to travel 160 miles to warn them. Although the men were suspicious of Boone, he did eventually convince them to listen to him. On September 8th, the Great Siege of Boonesboro began and lasted for 12 days. The Shawnees' attack didn't succeed and they retreated. Afterwards, Boone was charged for aiding the British, but he was proven innocent after a court-martial examined the evidence. Boone was then promoted to major and allowed to reunite with his family in North Carolina. It's said that George Washington himself would punish deserting soldiers by forcing them to run the gauntlet. In 1777, Washington struggled to keep his armies supplied with soldiers. It's known that he would lash and even threaten to shoot deserters on sight. Some of the more modern examples of running the gauntlet are far less violent. In lacrosse and ice hockey, they often call a type of drill the gauntlet. It's when one player is blocked or checked by the rest of the team. It's also found in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. When a student is promoted to the next colored belt, they have to go through the gauntlet. In Portuguese, it's known as Corredor Polonês, which means Polish corridor. It's often abbreviated to corredor. The student will have to run between 2 rows of their fellow jiu-jitero. The student's training partners will use their own jiu-jitsu belts to hit the student as they run through. It's not something all practitioners of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu agree with. For instance, prominent jiu-jitsu figures Keith Owen and Caio Terra have spoken out against the ritual in 2015 on social media. The Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Gauntlet is said to have been started by Chris Hauter in California in the 90s. Recently, there's been an internet component to running the gauntlet. The Run the Gauntlet Challenge is a website where people are asked to, quote, run the gauntlet by watching 20 gruesome videos, each increasing in depravity. They range from pornography to gore and torture videos. It launched back in 2014, but TikTok brought the site back into the public eye in 2022. Maybe one day it'll mean something nice, but we can't see that happening anytime soon. For more videos like this one, check out Eaten Alive, Scaphism, Worst Punishments in the History of Mankind, and The Brazen Bull, Worst Punishment in the History of Mankind.